Seasonic, the heart of your system.
Hello, Briony here from Kit Guru, and in this video I'm taking a look at two cases from Sharkoon. They are basically the same chassis. They are called the Pure Steel PC case. I've got the base model, which is available in either a white or a black version, and that retails at around £70, or I've got the RGB version of the Pure Steel case that retails for around £90 because it does come with 4 pre-installed RGB fans. So I do really like the look of the white case. It is very, very pretty. I do love white computer components. I think it's very sort of like a blank canvas really. Like if you're someone that's looking at modding and things, I think the white one might be the one to go for. The RGB version of the case is only available in black, and that is the one that I'm going to be building in, just because I want to try out sort of the RGB functionality and see if those fans are actually worth the extra £20. So to kick off the start of the review, obviously I haven't got any of my components and stuff in them yet. This is just like my first impressions. So they haven't got any parts in just because they're easier to move around and take a look at before they're full of my test build. So the case itself, it is a mid-tower size. It comes with dimensions of a length of 47.4 centimeters, a width of 21 centimeters, and a height of 47.5 centimeters. Honestly, the first impression I got from this case is how similar it looks to another case I reviewed, which is the Aerocool Glow case that I reviewed about 2 months ago. This case is like so similar compared to that other case, which also is very similar to the InWin 101. I did really like the Aerocool Glow case, so I do have high hopes for this one. As cases go, I would say the Pure Steel case is quite plain really. It's not that it's bad looking, it just works as more of like a frame. I think most of the focus is definitely on the big tempered glass side panel and obviously whatever components you're going to put alongside the RGB fans going on. The white, same sort of goes for the white case, but in fact it's like even more of a blank canvas because of course it is white and it also doesn't come with the extra RGB lighting. So I think if you've got some really nice components and you do want to just show them off and not have the case be sort of like the main event, then this is quite a good option. Even though most of the focus is on the tempered glass side panel, it does have like a full metal chassis and all the panels are coated in a decent amount of either black paint or white paint that seems to be finished really nicely. On the front of the case, up top is where you'll find the little I/O panel. It is pretty similar to what you get on pretty much every case. It sits just on the right hand side, so you've got a big power button that I think is probably going to light up when we've got some power going to the case. There's also 2 USB ports and a jack for audio and a jack for headphones, and then there is also a little button as well that I imagine will probably control the RGB lighting. That button does still exist on the white version of the case, so if you wanted to use it as a reset switch, or you could use it to control RGB lighting if you decide to add an RGB controller into the more base version of the case. I've just taken the white version of the Pure Steel case out of the equation so we can take a look at what's going on inside this chassis without it just like falling onto the floor and smashing. So I'm just going to remove the tempered glass side panel. So you sort of unscrew the 2 screws halfway, and then it is on sort of a bit of a hinge. Like I said, this case is very, very similar to the Aerocool Glow. Pretty much exactly the same. So it has this like hinge side panel that once again it doesn't always sort of grip into place, so you can't just sort of swing it open. You do have to be a bit careful with it, but it does sort of like sit on its own, so if you wanted to show off your components or get into your case quite easily, I do quite like it. You don't have like 4 big screws to take off like you do on a normal tempered glass side panel. So looking inside, you will see there is no space down the bottom here to put the power supply. The power supply goes in the top of the case behind this PSU shroud. It does have this sort of rather nice Sharkoon branding. It's the only real branding on this case overall actually that I've seen is just Sharkoon sort of embossed into the PSU shroud. At the back of the case there is 7 PCIe slots. I do like that they are not the horrible snap off ones. They look like the ones that you screw off, so that's definitely a big thumbs up for me. And also a nice little feature as well, there's actually a like little GPU support bracket. I haven't seen one like this on a case before, so I'll be interested to see how sort of effective it is. But I do think it's a nice little feature, and it's got a bit of like rubber coating on it as well to stop it scratching the GPU itself. For a mid-tower chassis, this case certainly has plenty of options when it comes to cooling. As you can see, there's 3 120mm fans pre-installed in the bottom of the case. Those are the RGB fans. There's a 4th one set up in the back also, and they do feel like pretty decent, well-built fans. They don't feel like sort of cheap, rubbishy RGB fans. They seem like pretty high-quality ones, so I've got higher hopes for those. Hopefully they do perform well. You can also add in 2 120mm fans on this sort of like side panel here if you remove the metal plate. That does mean that you lose some of the hard drive mounting spots though. Or you can also add 2 120mm fans in the front of the case. I probably wouldn't opt to do that because there isn't really anywhere for air to actually get in the front, so they'd sort of be like sucking on a metal panel. So I don't really see the point in that. I guess it's maybe for aesthetics, but putting some extra fans on here to sort of exhaust at the back I think would probably help with airflow. Also, if you want to use an all-in-one cooler, you can fit a 240mm radiator here, or you can put a 360mm radiator in the bottom of the case. Sharkoon have set up the airflow on this case so that the 3 fans at the bottom are set as an intake, and then the 1 fan on the back is set as an exhaust fan. This does definitely make sense to me, as I know when I built in the AeroCool Glow case, a few people sort of like scolded me in the comments for putting 3 fans as exhaust with no intake fans because I was just creating a load of negative pressure. So this setup does definitely make a lot more sense, and if you added in a couple of extra fans you'd have 3 intaking and 3 exhausting. On the bottom of the case there is 2 sort of rather large plastic feet, and they've both got little rubber pads on the bottom to sort of stop the case moving around, and what they do is create a really good amount of clearance underneath the case so that those 3 fans can hopefully suck in plenty of air. Even though they are at the bottom, even though they're intaking, I think there should be a good amount of sort of space to get plenty of air in there. Also, on the bottom of the case there is this rather large dust filter. I do really like this because it slides out sideways, which definitely is going to make it a lot easier to sort of get to and clean, and it also does feel quite well built as well, so I think it's going to do a good job of preventing any excess dust coming into the case from the bottom. I've now flipped the case around so we can take a look at what's going on the back. As you can see, it is another big plain black panel like the rest of the case, but it does feature these rather sort of attractive and rather familiar looking hexagonal sort of vent area for those 2. If you add 2 extra fans in, it will obviously exhaust out the back here, which I think is quite a nifty idea when it comes to airflow. This back panel is reasonably easy to remove. It's got 2 thumb screws, and it does have the same sort of like hinge design as the other panel. And taking a look back here, I'll start off with up the top, so you can see that it's got some really generous space behind that PSU shroud. So you've got plenty of space for a really big power supply and also all the cables that go with it. You've got a 3.5-inch drive bay, and this case can take up to 3 3.5-inch drives or 5 2.5-inch SSDs, depending on what sort of configuration you go for with the fans and things. I liked that the I/O cables, they're all coated in like a nice black plastic, so I definitely think that's going to come in handy. It definitely does look a lot neater than having a load of like rainbow cables. It makes it just a little bit sort of easier to cable manage and things. There's seems to be plenty of places to sort of thread cable ties through. There seems to be some nice holes at the top here to put cables through from the power supply to connect up to the motherboard, and I do like that it has the little rubber grommets as well to sort of keep the cables protected. The RGB controller that comes with the RGB version of the Pure Steel case is sort of situated down in the middle here, and it has the option to connect up to 8 3-pin RGB devices. So the 4 RGB fans that come with this case populate 4 of those slots, and then you've got 4 further slots. So just in case you wanted to fill up all the available fan slots on this case, you can plug them into the same RGB controller. It is powered by a SATA power connection, which I do really like, but unfortunately I did spot some Molex connectors in this case because the fans themselves are actually powered via a Molex connection. I'm not too bothered because there is 4 fans, so running a Molex cable from the power supply into the case for more than one thing isn't too bad. It's just when it's only an RGB controller that takes Molex, it like really annoys me. Also, the RGB controller can be plugged into a compatible RGB motherboard. So if you've got like Aura Sync or like Mystic Lighting, it has got a 3-pin RGB connector that you can plug into a 3-pin RGB header on your motherboard and sort of like synchronize the lighting that way. Or of course it does work with the button on top of the case, which I might have to use depending on if this connector works with my motherboard or not. The white Sharkoon Pure Steel case is back on my table here beside me, just so we can take a look at the quick differences between this one and the RGB version. It's basically exactly the same, apart from it comes in a white coloration. And it does have slightly different fans. So it does come with fans, which I do like. It comes with 2 sort of plain black fans, one on the bottom at the front here and one at the back of the case. They are 120mm fans, and they do feel slightly different. They are definitely a sort of cheaper fan than the ones that are in the RGB case, but I think they should do the job. It is nice that it does come with a couple of fans, so you can just chuck your components straight in here and it will cool them without you having to buy any extra components. What I really like as well is that it is painted on the inside. I think having the PSU shroud in black, I don't like it that much. I do think I prefer it if it was white, but some people I think might enjoy the contrast. But I think the overall paint job, like the nice white paint job, does look really good, and it should look nice with some components in. And in general, I do quite like this case at the moment. I think the build quality is really good. It does feel very solid, very sturdy. Like I said, it is just like the Aerocool Glow case that I did really like. So I have very high hopes for when I get some components in this case and sort of try it out and things. So through the power of editing, we're going to jump forward in time. I'm going to be back, I'm going to have components in, I'm going to have done all my testing, and we can see how well this case performs and whether it is worth the £70 for the white version or £90 for the RGB version price tag. So I've now got the RGB steel case from Sharkoon full of lots of little components. Here is a full list of everything I used in case you're curious what I opted to put in this case. In the end, I did actually have the opportunity to build twice in this case because my power supply decided that it could no longer live another day, and it died on me. Fortunately, Leo came to the rescue and he sent me another one, so it only sent me back like a couple of days. But it did mean that I did have to sort of like build twice because I had to take the dead power supply out, sort of like figure out what was going on and then rebuild with a new power supply. But I did find building in this case a pleasant experience, so in the end it wasn't actually too bad. And now it's full of components, it does look rather nice. Like I said, when it was empty, it does appear as more of a frame. Main focus is obviously on the window. I have taken the tempered glass side panel off because I didn't want to battle with any reflections, but I think it is definitely a case for those of you that want to show off what's going on. And the RGB fans do look really nice now as well. They are really bright fans. I've currently got them set to like the rainbow wave, rainbow spinny effect, which is my favorite. But there's 16 different options to choose between, and you change them using the button on the top of the case. And you've got like breathing ones, and there's lots of static colors to choose between things. If that isn't enough customization as well, do remember that that is that little 3-pin RGB connector. So if you've got a compatible motherboard, you can use the software that comes with that, and then you've got even more RGB customization for these fans. When it came to building this case, even the second time around, I didn't find it too bad at all. There wasn't anything about it that like frustrated me greatly or made it really awkward to build in. Everything was pretty much straightforward. The power supply, there was plenty of space to get it up in behind that PSU shroud. There's a decent amount of room between the bottom fans and the PSU shroud to sort of maneuver the motherboard into place. And also all the standoffs are already fitted in the case, so that saves me trying to get them in and fiddle around with them because I find that slightly annoying. The PCIe slots are easy to unscrew and take off. They're not the horrible snap-off ones. And I also found the GPU bracket quite easy to fit. I'm not really sure with the graphics card that I'm using it does anything because it doesn't really sag anyway, but if you've got like a really big sort of like triple fan card, I think the GPU bracket is probably going to help if GPU sag is something that you're sort of worried about in your build. The SSD, fitting that was a little bit awkward, and also getting the 8-pin in as well was a little bit awkward. The 8-pin, I sort of like had a bit of a battle with my CPU cooler. I didn't realise how sharp it was actually, but I sort of looked down and I was like, oh, I've savaged my hand trying to get the 8-pin in. But it did go in eventually. It just is a little bit tight against that PSU shroud. And the SSD is just because the clearance, it goes straight onto the back of the motherboard tray. Therefore, the clearance to get the SATA data and power connector in is a little bit tight. So I actually inserted those cables and then screwed it onto the back of the motherboard tray. But I think it does look rather smart where it is, even though it is upside down, so I can route the cables nicely. My main niggle with what's going on with the front of the case here is my cable management because of the RGB fans. So like I said when we were taking a look at the case when it was empty, they look like they have mullets connectors. They do also have 3-pin connectors which are used for the fan headers on my motherboard. Unfortunately though, the mullets connector is like daisy chained, so I found that really awkward to sort of route the cables, and one of them looks really ugly. There's just like a mullets connector hanging out above my graphics card. I just don't like how it looks at all. I really wish that the fans, Sharkoon just opted to use 3-pin fans and then maybe included a sort of mullets adapter in with the accessories for people that don't have as many fan handles on their motherboard. I think that would be like a more elegant solution, or if they're feeling really generous, they could have maybe put in a fan controller bundled with the RGB controller that already comes with the case. So I've now flipped this case around so we can take a look at what's going on behind the side panel. Don't judge my cable management too much because I did have to completely redo it, and as you can imagine I was slightly unenthusiastic the second time around. Honestly, one of the first things that went through my head when the power supply exploded was, oh my god, I'm gonna have to cable management everything again, because I absolutely hate doing it. It's the worst part of building. It takes the longest amount of time. I just want to turn the computer on and play with it. But this case actually wasn't too bad, even though I'm complaining. There's plenty of space at the top here behind that PSU shroud to shove like all the extra length of the cables. I did sort of like haphazardly shove them in there. Shoving is probably the best explanation for what I did in terms of cable management. Cable tie slots, there is a decent amount to thread the cable ties through. I find it really frustrating when I've got like a good cable route but there's nowhere to tie the cables down. This case I didn't have any issues. You've got plenty of different options. There's lots of places to thread cables through to the front of where the motherboard is and plug everything in, so holes for the fans to go through. I really like the big rubber grommets, and I also like these 3 slots down the bottom here that work really well for threading the fans through, or also threading the front I/O cables through. The clearance behind the motherboard tray and the side panel is really good also. You can sort of like roughly cable tie down the cables and it is very forgiving, and for me the side panel went back on straight away without any faffing around, which is definitely what you want. So now on to the performance of this case, because obviously it does look rather pretty, but if it doesn't do well at cooling components and staying quiet, then it is pretty pointless as a thing and it shouldn't exist. Fortunately though, it's not too bad. The fans themselves I think are extremely good value for money when it comes to aesthetics and build quality. They are very bright, the RGB lighting is very pretty, they also feel very sturdy. Unfortunately I did find that comes off with the payoff that they are a little bit on the loud side. Originally, before I rebuilt the case with the new power supply, I had plugged 3 fans into a Molex cable and 1 fan into the motherboard header. I did find that was really loud though. I did actually test the PC, it did boot before the power supply exploded. Just when I turned it on the next day, that's when it decided to break. and those fans were really annoying, so I was going to change them anyway. So when I rebuilt it, I just plugged them all into motherboard fan headers, because with the wireless connector they were running at full speed and it just sounded awful, and I was like, I'm going to go for practicality over aesthetics in this case for definite. They are still loud though, like I said. Like I took a reading of 41 decibels, which is quite a bit quieter than they were at full speed, but obviously that's not a silent fan. And also when the PC went under load as well, I took a reading of 45 decibels. So they don't spin up by much when the components got warmer, but they aren't really a silent fan. So if you're someone that wants fans that are going to be quiet, you don't want too much noise around you, like if you have a headset on, I didn't notice it at all, but I know a lot of people do find any fan noise irritating, in which case these fans probably aren't going to be for you. However, the fans do a very good job of cooling. So I did my usual test. I ran AIDA64 for 10 minutes and I had a good gaming session as well, to be honest. That evening, after I fixed the computer and it was working again, I was just like, gonna play some games, gonna treat myself. So I did keep an eye on the temperatures, because obviously AIDA64 isn't completely representative of like a real world situation, but nothing got hot really. The CPU reached 51 degrees, which is like nothing, and the GPU only got up to 71. So there's no issues with cooling and airflow and things. It does a good job of keeping components cool. It just sort of comes with the payoff that the fans are a little bit on the noisy side. So overall, what do I think of the pure steel case from Sharkoon? I do actually quite like this case. I'm not too surprised because it is very similar to the Aerocool Glow case. I was expecting to enjoy it. And yeah, it is a good case. I think it looks very nice. It is more of a plain black box, but I think it does a good job for those of you that want a big tempered glass side panel just to show off the components on the inside. The lighting is very nice. It's got loads of different settings to choose between. The build quality is very good. It's very solid, very sturdy, well built case. Also it does perform well, and I think it does come at a reasonable price as well. Obviously we took a look at the white case, and that's like the base version that comes at £70, which I don't think is too bad for a case of this sort of build quality. And then you also, this one's an extra £20. I do think it is worth it. It does bring the price up to 90, so there's a lot of competition around that price point. But the fact that you get 4 RGB fans, I think is a really good deal, because like if you look at this very similar fans from like the likes of Corsair, they can cost like triple what these fans cost. So you're paying £5 per fan here. You go to get them, I think I looked on Amazon, like even the cheapest version of this type of fan is going to cost you at least £5 each. So I do think you are getting a pretty good deal with this case, and I think it is definitely one to consider if you're on the lookout for a new case before the year ends. If you like this video from Kit Guru, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't been here before, welcome to our channel. I hope you like this video. We've got loads of more content to come. Keep watching, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and also remember to hit the little bell icon as well. Also, if you are unaware, at the moment it's December, it's on the run up to Christmas. Kit Guru, we do a really nice advent calendar giveaway on our Facebook page. So if you head over to Facebook, every single day we post a new product. Like, we work with companies, we get some really cool gear to give away to you guys, and every day we announce a new winner. So there's something to win every day. It's not complete rubbish either. I think yesterday was like an AK racing chair. We've given away like SSDs and stuff. I don't know what's coming because they don't tell me, but it looks pretty good so far. I think there's even a graphics card. So check that out as well. It's just like a quick reminder. Thank you very much for watching, and remember to hit like.